there's a Greek word proskuneo, something like that. I was Mexican. I'm not from Greece, so I don't know how to pronounce that. But anyways, proskuneo, which means kiss the hand, right? So whenever we worship, may we have that in our heads that we are here to kiss the hand of God, right? Thinking about God being royalty. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. But another attribute of God is serving Him. Serving Him. How do we go about that? Maybe perhaps you've been in church for so long and you have yet to serve Him. Or maybe you have not made the decision to follow Christ, but you want to serve Him, but you just do not know how to go about it. Or maybe perhaps your schedule doesn't permit you, your job, your career doesn't let you, maybe school doesn't let you for those of you who are in college. Maybe, I do not know, but excuses, we can always find them. Always. We can always find them. You know, from the moment that we were born, guess what? Nobody taught us to be selfish. No one did. No one did. We're all, by nature, selfish human beings. I see it in my girls every single day. And I try to teach them the opposite of being selfish, right? I teach them to care. I teach them to share. I teach them to look out for others. I teach them to obey. But, I don't know, but they learned the word mine or mío really, really quick. And it wasn't from me. Maybe they learned it from my wife. No, I'm just kidding. No, but they did not learn that from us. Okay. So they are just natural. I mean, we are all just natural born sinners, natural born selfish people. And then guess what? Even maybe perhaps our parents taught us to be selfish, right? Do what's convenient for you. Do what's best for you, right? Look out for yourself. Which some of that advice, yes, it's good, depending on what context it's being used. But sometimes we apply that in everything that we do. Hey, you want to help out? Is it convenient? No, it's going to take too much of my time. Hey, you want to do this? You ask at the wrong time, right? So maybe even our parents have added on to our selfishness instead of teaching us to be selfless. So if we want a perfect example of being selfless, I wish I could say, look at me, but I can't because I'm selfish myself, right? And here's the thing. What causes us to sometimes be selfish is our own evil desires that we struggle with every single day. That gets in the way of us wanting to serve others. That gets in the way of loving others. Why? Because we love ourselves a little bit or a little way too much. A little way too much. We're too preoccupied on what's best for me, on what's convenient for me, instead of thinking what is best for the kingdom of God. What is best for His kingdom? What is best for this gospel? What is best to just shine this light in this world of darkness? And here's the thing. We live in a generation where we're not changing the message of the gospel. We're not. We are no one to change it. We shouldn't change it. Jesus said Himself, anyone adds or takes away from my word, they will be what? It would be what? Anathema. Cursed. Right? So we can't change the gospel. But can we change the way we go about things? Definitely. Social media didn't exist back then. Internet didn't exist back then. Back in the day, if you think about it, we never some way, somehow collaborated sports, right, with church. We never did that. We don't do that. Well, it's a sin to bring a soccer ball up here. You know, the whole church is going to burn down now, right? No, we have changed our ways of doing things to reach people. And here's the thing. We are all called to serve. Every single one of us. Every single one of us. But sometimes we're just too comfortable where we're at. And God has called us not to be comfortable, but God has called us to be uncomfortable. He has called us to carry on this message of hope, this message of life. And it all starts with our attitude. Every single morning, we choose what attitude we're going to have. Did you all have a good attitude this morning? I know I struggled. Believe me, I struggled. I was snoozing for like over an hour. I kid you not. That's what I kind of usually do. I usually set my alarm like at 5:30 in the morning. Like that, it gives me at least about an hour to snooze. I hope I just don't push stop, right? If I push stop, then forget it. I'm doomed, right? But anyways, just like I was sharing with the previous, the 8 o'clock service, 8:30 service, Pastor Vidal has taught us that within Christ or with our responsibilities, we don't have to do things, we get to do things, right? This whole time change thing, something that we have to do. I don't feel too pleased with saying I get to change the hour. No, I had to change the hour on my clock. Or if not, I'm going to be doomed everywhere. I'm going to be late everywhere. But anyways, going back to this morning, yeah, I had a hard time getting up. It's just one of those where after so many snoozes, I just had to just spring off bed. If I don't spring off bed, then forget it. I'm doomed. So I wake my wife up. Can I tell them what you said? Yeah, okay. She said, "Can I stay and you go?" I was like, "No." Like, I know the time changed, but we are not to change what we are ought to do, right? Either way, you kind of just come along for the ride, okay? You have the easy part, right? So anyways, obviously, whenever something changes in our lives, it's like a big deal. Whether it's time, or maybe for the Hispanic culture, we live life like if they're always changing the time, right? We just never show up on time. But anyways, let's move on. Going back to starting off with having a good attitude, we all have to make decisions, right? You all decided whether you were going to wash up or not. Maybe you had time this morning or not. You decided what you were going to have for breakfast. I hope and pray that you decided to brush your teeth. Right? We don't want no dragon breath, none of that. We want to be able to shake your hand and not have to stand at a distance. But everything starts off with an attitude. Sometimes we think that we inherit the attitude from our parents. Oh, you have your dad's attitude. You have your mom's attitude. But in reality, we all make a choice what attitude we're going to have. We all live this life. We all go through problems. We all go through trials. And depending on what kind of attitude we have, or what kind of attitude you decide to have, you're either going to have a harder time going through it, or things will always be a lot easier or simpler to have a positive and a good attitude. So I want to go dig into the scriptures, go into the words in 1 Peter chapter 4. And I'm going to talk a little bit about living for God, and something that is required of us as Christians to live for God is to serve God. We cannot say that we live for God when all we are doing is just serving ourselves. We can't do that. Salvation, we cannot just say, hey, you know what? I'm saved, forget everyone else. Right? This is not like the scene in the Titanic where you just save yourself and peace out everyone who's still on the boat or in the water. Right? Salvation doesn't work that way. Salvation is more about if you're saved, it's so you could also be used to save others. But it's our selfish way of being. We're like, okay, well, I'm saved, peace. Who cares about everyone? And here's the thing. What's kind of like our motto here at church, right? We love God, and then what? We love others. We love God and we love others. We will never be able to love others if we do not love God. It doesn't work that way. You can't say you fully love your spouse and you don't love God. You can't say that you fully love your children if you don't love God. Believe me, to love your spouse, cover your ears, son. You need to love God. You need to love God. To love your children, to parent your children, you need to love God. You need to love God. And here's the thing. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 1 says this. I'll be reading from verse 1 all the way to 11. So verse 1, it says this. Therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, arm yourselves also with the same attitude, because whoever suffers in the body is done with sin. Before I continue, Peter's telling us, arm yourselves with the same attitude, the attitude that Jesus had while carrying that cross or on the way to the cross. Jesus never said, hey, guess what? That cross is going to be uncomfortable. Can you get me a little, some padding for my shoulders so I can carry that cross better? Or can someone else do it? Or is someone else going to help me carry this cross? Like, he never complained about it. He never whined about it. He just simply took it. And while he was praying there in Gethsemane, he knew what he was going to suffer. Remember, Jesus in the flesh, he's human. He was not only God, but he was also human, right? So therefore, being human, humans have emotions, humans have feelings, humans experience pain, humans have headaches, humans are hungry, right? He was also human. He was kind of worried or kind of like just, he just couldn't fathom the thought of the wrath of God upon him. He couldn't just fathom the thought of what he was going to go through. And yet, while he was praying to the Father, he said, you know what? Let your will be done. Even if it's going to break me, let your will be done. Even though it's going to hurt, let your will be done. Even though people are going to despise me and spit on me, let your will be done. So how many times don't we often ask God to guide us into his will? Or we ask, what is the purpose for my life? I want God's plan for my life. I don't want to go outside his will. Well, guess what? Being in his will is never going to be in favor of our selfish way of being. Never. It's never going to be in favor in our selfish way of being. So therefore, that's why Peter tells us, arm yourselves with the same attitude. Verse 2, as a result, they do not live the rest of their earthly lives for evil human desires, but rather for the will of God. So therefore, a person cannot be living out their evil desires and thinking they are living in God under the umbrella of God's will. So what is it? Who do we want to please? Do we want to please ourselves or do we want to please God? Jesus himself said, you cannot serve two what? You can't have two masters. Whether it's your flesh and God, or Satan and God, or whatever evil doings or evil beings and God, it just can't happen that way. It cannot be, now we think about idolatry, it's anything and everything that takes the place of God. So sometimes that could be your family, sometimes that could be your career, sometimes that could be your studies, whatever it is, anything that takes the place of God, that is idolatry. But here's the thing. If you're still asking, how can I serve God? How can I remain in his will? Now, what I'm trying to say is that we're not all called to resign our careers and join seminary school and become preachers and pastors and ministers. We're not all called to do that. Some of us are. But yet, we are all called to serve him. In spite of what you do, in spite of what you're doing, in spite of what your vocation is, we are all called to serve him. All of us. I'm convinced that we need more Christian teachers out there. We need more Christian nurses. We need more Christian doctors. We need more Christian politicians. We need more Christians out there in this world. Like, we need to go literally outside these four walls called church and be light out there where there's darkness. In here, we all should be illuminated. What good does it do us to just keep the light within these four walls? None whatsoever, none. We need to go outside these four walls called church and be light out there where it's needed. And that's why I love the fact how we can change our methods, how we go about sharing the gospel. We're not changing the message, but we will change our methods. Soccer camp, it's a great way to share the gospel. It's a great way. A lot of people love sports. Guess what? Don't a lot of people miss church for sports? I was born in Mexico. Okay, for those of you that don't know, my name is Nutze. I am the youth pastor here in this church. I was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco. I have a German last name, Nutze. So when I worked at a private school, some of the kids were like, "You're Mexican and you have a German last name, so that means you're Germex." I was like, okay, fine, put it however you want to, right? So that's me, right? So anyways, now my mind just went blank. I should have just saved that one for later. But anyways, we'll just move on. But we are all called to serve God. You know, we can change the methods. You know, we can link it to sports. And like I said, you know, we need more Christian teachers out there. We can be light in our schools. We need light in our hospitals, light in our courts. We can change the methods on how to go about sharing the gospel. That's the reason why a lot of times people don't serve, because they have that misconception that they have to quit everything and go to seminary school, and it's not like that. I believe that you are more needed out there than in here. There's more darkness out there. You are more needed wherever it is that you are working at, wherever it is that you have spent your lifetime doing. You are needed there. School setting, I think about FCA. That's something that every now and then, like, I'll get involved. The FCA person will go to me, "Hey, can you lead something? Can you lead a Bible study this Friday?" Yeah, go for it, you know. I don't mind talking to my students. I don't mind talking to them about the Bible. There are ways to go about that. Listen, the Bible says this: "For you have spent enough time in the past doing what pagans choose to do." Is there a contrast between your life then and your life now? Is there a difference? Is there a difference? Because right here, Peter's pretty much preaching to the church, preaching to the choir. It says, "For you have spent enough time in the past doing what pagans choose to do," which is, I'll read you the list: living in debauchery, lust, drunkenness, orgies, carousing, and detestable idolatry. So therefore, he's saying, have you not had enough of sin? Do you not remember what sin led you to? On Wednesdays, I'm doing a series with the youth on the prodigal son, and we all know that this prodigal son, the reason why he left his father was to go and pursue not God's will. He went to go pursue his evil desires. And where did it lead him to? Y'all know the story. Where did his evil desires lead him? It led him to ruins. It led him to be eating with pigs. And here's the thing. I mentioned that I grew up, or I spent most of my summers in Mexico, most of my winters in Mexico. And they would always pass by house to house, right? You know, we're here to pick up your leftovers, right? So they would pick up everyone's leftovers, and they would feed that to the pigs. They would feed that to the pigs. So it was just this big old smoothie of everyone's leftovers. And you think about the prodigal son, that's what he was having for dinner. That's what he was having for breakfast. All because he was pursuing his evil desires rather than pursuing the will of God. The will of God, I think we just make it more complicated than what it really is. Here's the thing. Are we obedient? The Bible tells us not to do something. Like, whatever the Bible says, whatever God says, we should not negotiate with God. If that's what he said for us to do, we should do it. If he tells us not to do something, we should not do it. We can't compromise with God and say just one more time, or hold on, God, I'll wait till next week, or you know what, God, I'm not ready to follow you. I'm not ready to be baptized. I'm not ready to serve you. Let me fix things with my schedule. Let me fix things in my life. Let me fix things in my relationships, and then I'll go ahead and serve you. It doesn't work that way. Because believe me, as much as we try to be perfect, we're always going to come up short. We're always trying to put things into place. We're always trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And sometimes when we get that image, it just doesn't make sense. It's a distorted image of our sinful life. And the only way to get through that is obviously by the blood of Christ that cleanses us from all sin. It is that cross that we should pursue. It is that cross that we should just admire for God caring for us. Sometimes maybe we think we're just too good enough. I always say this: you will always do what's important to you. Always. So if you show up late somewhere, it's because you were somewhere else that was more important to you. Everyone does what's more important. Everybody. Everybody. How important is it to you to serve God? How important is it to you? Ministers, pastors, we will do our calling. But followers of Christ, guess what? We're all called to be in the same battle. We're all called to fight. We're all called to share this gospel. Everyone. The people that you see every single day, I don't see every single day. Pastor doesn't see every single day. Think about your workplace. Think about your home. I don't live with you. I don't work with you. But you do live with your family. You do work with the people that you work with. So therefore, let yourself be used by God. Be light in this darkness. I think we just need to stop all excuses that we're not ready or we're not good enough. Believe me, we're never going to be good enough. If there's anything good of us or in us, it is Christ himself. Not us. I'm no good without him. I can't do anything without him. If I rely on my strength, if I rely on my wisdom, I will fail. Any person that does that will fail. Don't we ask God for strength every single day? Don't we ask him for wisdom? Everything that you need, he will provide. Everything. Everything. This is not AAU basketball where you have to have the right shoes or you got to have, it's not any extracurricular activity that you must obtain this, obtain that in order to be part of a club. It's none of that. The only thing that we must do is just believe. Follow Jesus and believe. Whenever Jesus did great things in people's lives, he always asked, do you believe? Do you believe? And when you believe, if you truly believe, you will do it. Nobody goes to college. No one goes to college without the expectation of getting the degree that they are pursuing. Everyone goes to college. Everyone studies hard because they believe that one day they're going to complete their hours and get that degree that they so much dreamed of having or pursuing. I'll finish with this. I'll go to verse 8. It says this: above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. 10. Each of you use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. 11. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus. He has equipped us all. We all have gifts. We can't say that I ain't good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not equipped. Guess what? You don't have to worry about equipping yourself because He has already equipped you. The thing is, what are you going to do with the gifts and the talents, the life that God has given you? One day we will be judged. Maybe that might be one of the questions we are asked. What did you do with your life? What did you do with your son and daughter? What did you do? How did you represent me in your life? Or is your life being more giving testimony of who you are rather than who Jesus is? We are all called to be light. We are all called to serve. And I want to encourage you, church, to obey your calling. Obey your calling. We are all called to serve. We are all called to teach. We are all called to share this gospel. We are all called to bring hope to the hopeless. We are all called to uplift the broken. We are all called to do so. We are all called to serve. And we have many ministries here at church where you can get yourself plugged in, to use your talents, to use your gifts, to invest your time. I say invest because one day you'll be living forever. Something that my mother taught me growing up, that whenever someone invites me over to their home, to never show up empty-handed, right? Always show up with a pan dulce or something, conchas, right? Tortillas, I don't know, tamales or cokes or something, but always show up with something. When we get to be in the presence of the Lord, may we not show up empty-handed. Those crowns and those rewards that we receive for being a good steward, for being a good server, a servant, may we show up with those so we can bow down at the feet of Jesus.